Hear that? Believe it or not, summer is just around the corner. Luckily, Armor All, America's most trusted auto appearance brand, has what your car needs to get that perfect summer shine. Plus, now through May 31st, we'll give you $5 for every $20 you spend on Armor All products. That means car wash pods, protectant, tire shine, you name it. Find out how to get your $5 rebate at armorall.com. Armor All, less work, more clean. Terms apply.
Hello and welcome back to First Act, a podcast from Kochie's Business Builders. I'm Cess Busby.
And I'm Adam Bubb.
And thanks for joining us as we kick off Season 3 of First Act, the podcast where we dig into the origin stories of Australia's most fascinating movers and shakers in business and life.
Oh, it's good to be back, Cess. It's nice to see you.
Yes.
Now, if it's your first time joining us, Cess and I are editors at Kochie's Business Builders, Australia's leading TV show and digital network for small business news, inspiration and resources. We've got around 40 years experience interviewing thousands of people between us. Gosh, that makes us sound old.
I know.
Every time I see that.
Get the walking stick out.
So, look, you can say we love a good story. Look, after you've listened to today's podcast, make sure to check out dozens of our First Act conversations from last year with the best entrepreneurs in the biz. And pop us a 5-star rating on your podcast app if you feel so inclined.
Now, today's guest is Justin Hales. Justin is the CEO and founder of Camplify, a startup that he once described as the Airbnb of caravan and campervan hire. Now, since launching Camplify in 2015, Justin has helped thousands of Aussie holidaymakers connect with camper and caravan owners to enjoy the perfect getaway. And despite all the naysayers that he encountered when launching his business, he revolutionised the RV industry, a sector that was really pretty traditional, and he's developed a multimillion-dollar ASX-listed brand that has expanded far beyond its regional roots in Newcastle. Welcome, Justin.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Justin, it is great to have you and some of those birds chirping in the background. It makes me feel very relaxed, like I'm on holiday somewhere. I believe that you are on Lake Macquarie at the moment. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. Still enjoying a couple of weeks of holidays. It's been a fantastic summer to get out and about in nature. So I'm sure that all your listeners will feel very relaxed after listening to this and want to go and book a camping holiday.
Well, they may be right back at work. So I think while listening to it, it'll be kind of bringing back some of those holiday vibes. Now, look, we always start First Act with a First Act icebreaker. And your icebreaker question is, what is the best view you've ever woken up to and why was it so special?
So, I think I've had lots of opportunities to have some amazing views running a caravan camping company. I think probably the most amazing one I was in Spain. I had a camper van when we just launched over there. And I went up into the hills in Spain. It was about probably an hour outside of Madrid, and went for a drive down these windy roads, up and down a mountain. There was condors flying overhead, camped there for the night. Woke up in the morning, had this amazing view over Spain with lots of birds and wildlife around. And I think probably the most amazing thing to me was just to sit there with a cup of coffee and think, wow, this is a company that we only launched literally a few years ago, and now we're in 2 new countries and really taking the world by storm. So that was probably a great view for me.
Sounds like a pretty impressive view on all levels, Justin. I'd like to go back to the beginning, though. It wasn't always probably that impressive, maybe just a little bit impressive, but because you started your first business as a teenager when you were growing up in and around Newcastle. So do you think that you were a natural-born entrepreneur?
I think so. I always sort of had a passion for starting and running businesses. Even when I was sort of working in businesses, I was always trying to help them get better and look for new revenue streams and look for how they could improve and grow. So I think it's something that really drives me and something I really enjoy. So it's great to be able to start my first business when I was quite young, and every sort of thing that I've done, I guess I've learnt something different that's helped me along this journey.
Well, that's what this podcast is all about. We're looking at that kind of, I know it's so cliched to say journey, but really it is your journey as a whole and all those different steps, those building blocks, because you don't learn it all in one go, do you? There's something you take from each experience.
Absolutely. And I think it's a lived experience that you kind of have to walk that path so that you can make your own mistakes, you can learn from things, you can see how to make a decision and why. And every time you do that, I think if you're smart, you'll take a reflective moment to look at that and think, why did I do it that way? Could I have done it better? If I face that similar thing again in the future, what will I do that next time?
One of your earliest jobs was actually at Dick Smith Electronics, and I was looking at about 20 years ago. So Dick Smith Electronics, what did you learn from climbing the ranks of retail when you reflect way back on that before Camplify was even a thing?
Well, firstly, I can't believe it was over 20 years ago. Looking at that experience, it was just understanding how to really build great relationships with customers. In that business, we had lots and lots of repeat customers. We had customers that were either in the electronic space or mobile phone space or you name it. And I think we had some fantastic staff that really built great relationships, and those relationships kept those customers coming back over and over again. And I think that it's easy when you work in those consumer-facing businesses like retail. It's easy to think about, who's the next customer? But it's great to be able to really have those customers coming back to you because you're giving them great service, a great product and a great experience.
I'd like to dive into your Camplify journey from the very beginning. So a lot of entrepreneurial ideas we've found from doing this podcast seem to happen from friends getting together, walking and talking, hanging out at the beach.
On a beach. Oh, God, it's
Yes.
always the beach, isn't it?
So can you tell us what first sparked the idea for Camplify and what was the aha moment for you?
Yeah, so I was involved in another technology startup, ended up listing on the Australian Stock Exchange. We then got acquired off the stock exchange by an American company, went through that journey with them. That American company then got acquired by a bigger company. So it's sort of been through these various stages of that business, from being a business that was struggling for a little while, didn't have a great deal of capital, to the listed environment, and then to being acquired. And so, once we'd been through that journey, I had decided that, maybe it was time for me to go and look at my own technology startup. And, I had a whiteboard in my office at home, and, every couple of days I'd write down a different idea and sort of go and investigate that and see whether that was a thing and whether it could work. And, every afternoon I'd go for a walk with my wife and our dog. I was talking about, different ideas that I had and different ways of being able to get out and do my own thing. And my wife sort of said, yeah, that's great. But do you think you could book us a holiday? And I said, oh, yeah, I can do that. And she said, oh, look, I've never been camping and I'd like to go camping, but I don't want to stay in a tent. So go and book us a caravan to rent so we can take the dog away as well. I said, okay, I can do that. So I started looking into the ability for me to actually go and do that process. And I realised that really there was only a couple of really big commercial operators doing that, and that they were really focused on inbound tourists from overseas, and that for the domestic tourist, there wasn't really much available. And it was quite challenging to book. It was really restrictive. It was hard to get access to. And so I was like, oh, that's disappointing. And then sort of next day or next few days, I was sort of telling my wife this as we were continuing our walk. And then I noticed that we were walking past, hundreds of vans just parked on the side of the street. So it'd be good if there was something like Airbnb so we could rent our neighbour's caravan or motorhome. I sort of thought, oh, actually, that might be an idea. And I went back to my office and wrote that on my whiteboard and started to research things and found out that actually there wasn't much available in that space, and that, perhaps this would work really well as a business idea. And obviously, Airbnb had been quite successful, a little bit less in Australia at that point, but very much overseas. And, that really is where the idea sparked for me.
So there was walking and there was talking. As you said, so very important. You can never underestimate those those qualities. Now, the Camplify, it's much more than a rental platform for RVs and campers. It's also a community, and that's been a really core element that you've tapped in and you got right from the beginning. Tell us how you were able to build the Camplify community from scratch, and how were you able to get everyday Aussies to trust you and your idea?
Yeah, well, I think there was a couple of key things in that process, but I think going back to my Dick Smith days where I wanted to build customers that would be with us for a long time. I knew that if people were going to rent their vehicle out, that would be a relationship with us. It would be that ongoing repeat customer. So we started to survey customers and ask those people that owned vehicles, like, what would make you do this, and what would be your concerns, and how would it be acceptable in your eyes? So we started to listen to all those things and just be able to build that into the app and build that into the process for them. And then we sort of started building this community of people who wanted to be a part of that. We started a Facebook group. We started a database. Actually went out on the road and met a lot of these people. We did owners' nights in various cities so that people could talk to us and talk to others. And really we started to develop the platform and evolve the platform based on what those customers wanted. And so, that was very core to us being able to build this big network of people who could be and use the platform on an ongoing basis.
Is there a typical Camplify customer, like on both sides, the RV owners and the people renting the campers?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we really focus on families on both sides. So, a lot of our owners will be someone who they might have 1.5 incomes. They've got a family. They've bought this vehicle. They probably have a mortgage. They've got other stress on them as well. And for us, it's a great way to help them be able to own the vehicle of their dreams and still be able to make an income off it, and really be able to service that finance or whatever it might be on that vehicle through being able to rent it at the same time. And so sometimes those people become a term that we like to call ventrepreneurs. So they might own multiple and sort of start a little business and use us to be able to do that. And some might just be able to rent it out for 4 or 5 times a year and help pay their expenses. So that's our sort of typical customer on the owner side. And typically it means that then on the hirer side, we have a very similar customer because they're looking for the same type of vehicle as that owner's bought. So, typically younger families, they might be less experienced in that world and, really be looking to either get into this process or not want to be tied down to actual ownership and just be able to access that vehicle on demand when they want it in the areas that they want to be able to rent from.
Do you have many of those vantrepreneurs?
We do. It's something that we've built a lot of. I think we've probably got somewhere sort of in the vicinity of about 3,000 of those customers now. So they're the people that really want to get the most out of Camplify. They want to get really good returns. They want to get a good rental income. And some of them have been able to quit full-time jobs or whatever you want to make out of it, you can through buying more vans and putting in more effort into the platform.
So speaking of quitting full-time jobs, when was it that you realised Camplify actually has legs? It's going to be the job I can do day to day. When did you know it was time to quit?
It has legs and it also has wheels.
Yeah, exactly.
Had to do it. Sorry, guys.
We went through a business accelerator program. So we did that very early on in the piece, and that accelerator program really helped us to push forward really quickly. And through that, we also raised capital. So I think we raised our first $650,000 in investment after being really in existence for about 14 weeks. It was at that point I was like, okay, well, I've got to really make this work now. I've taken people's money. It's my responsibility to make sure that I give them a return. Although I didn't quite quit my full-time job there, I was sort of doing a little bit of consulting on the side. And so it was probably about after the first sort of season, so the summer months, and so it would have been probably sort of 6 months into the journey that we'd sort of been through that season. We'd started to get a lot of listings. We started to see some rentals come in. We started to learn a lot about things. We started to generate some income. And I was like, okay, well, now I've really got to do this full time because things are really picking up very quickly.
And that business program you're talking about was the NRMA Slingshot Pro Incubator program. How important is it to do programs like that for anyone who's doing a startup, who's making a startup, I should say, making it work?
Yeah, look, I think if you haven't been and done it before, so if you haven't built a tech startup, raised capital, done all those things that we've done on this process, that it's really important. I think we got a lot of great connection, great advice. We were able to raise capital. We were able to have NRMA invest in us, which was a really important process for us. So I think, if you have some desires to build a big business that can operate in multiple countries and you want to do it at speed, then those accelerator programs are really valuable.
Did NRMA also help out when it came time to kind of build the customer base?
They did. They're one of the, I think, third or fourth most trusted brands in Australia, and they have lots of members who have been customers for a long time. We started providing offers to those customers, and I think that was really well received and helped us leverage the great support that they have as a brand in Australia.
Yeah, so it is really important to be, like, if you can find those really big partners who can kind of help guide you on your journey.
That align.
Because you couldn't think NRMA and Camplify just makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. Did you ever have self-doubt or come to any point where you almost gave it all up and you thought, oh, you know what, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure I can keep going with this. So how do you keep yourself on track?
Oh, many times, many times. We've had a couple of instances early on where we were raising a next round of capital and we'd run out of money. So there was a sort of natural endpoint if we couldn't get the next bit of capital in, but we managed to do that, which was great. When we were trying to get our insurance product written, that was a real challenge, and we knew that was a key for us to being able to be successful. So trying to convince insurance companies that they could insure us and our customers. So I guess that there's been lots of times over the years that you think, well, if we can't solve this problem, then I don't know how we can move forward into the next stage. And I mean, even the start of COVID was exactly the same. We really didn't know how long lockdowns were going to last for. We didn't know, what this sort of meant for tourism in the future. We were refunding customers' money hand over fist there for a couple of weeks because customers were very concerned about the future. So, I think there's been lots of times where we're sort of faced with those challenges. And from my point of view, I've got a really good network of mentors around me. We've got a really strong board of directors. We've got some great staff and some great customers. And so, I think when those challenges pop up, we're able to really sort of leverage their experience and thoughts on the matters so that we can make the most out of things.
We'll be back with Justin with a little bit more after this short break.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, and I'm here with Keith, co-star of my upcoming film, If, only in theaters May 17th. Do you want to tell people the big news? All right, I'll do it. Sign up now and you'll get unlimited for $15 a month and 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan on us. MintMobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 equivalent to $15 per month. Unlimited over 40 gigabytes per month. Face lower speeds. Videos at 480p. Active Mint customers by 531.24 get 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan. Auto renews after 6 months. Offer ends May 31st, 2024. Separate Paramount Plus registration required. Terms and conditions apply if rated PG.
We're back with Justin Hales from Camplify. Now, Camplify scaled pretty rapidly in the first couple of years, and we've talked a little bit about that. But what teething pains came with that? I mean, obviously you talked a bit about capital raises and you're getting just the funding and the money side of it. But what were some of, for you, were the biggest teething pains?
I think really it's just sort of growing pains. We have been a business that grew really quickly, as you said. I think on an annualized basis, on an average, we sort of grew by over 100% in the first couple of years every year. And even in the last couple of years, we've still grown at about 80% average in terms of growing our overall revenue and customers and you name it. So when you're growing that fast over a long period of time, you've got to build systems and processes and people to keep up with that growth. And so I think that's, one of the biggest challenges is to be able to really evolve the business constantly to keep up with that. And we sort of look back at the numbers we're doing now and you think, well, 3 years ago we were doing 300% less than what we're doing now. And we've got to sort of continually put in place that next evolution to be able to do that. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
I know we have touched on cap raises. Adam mentioned it again just a second ago, but for a lot of our listeners that might be considering starting a business, cap raises are a really important part of that process. So can you talk us through that? Like, what was it like, the pitching process? What are your tips for small businesses?
So I think it depends on what stage you're at. So, early stage, you're really pitching the idea, the market potential, and yourself. That really people, those early stages, they invest in founders and they invest in the fact that that person's going to be able to execute, they're going to be able to get a return, they're going to be able to deliver an outcome, they're passionate, and that they're an investable person. So I think that's really one of the key things at the start. And really just knowing your numbers and doing your research. And I think that becomes more and more important as you go on and your company gets bigger and bigger and your capital raises get bigger. You've really got to know your company and be able to look at, what's this data telling me? What do these numbers mean? And what does that mean into the future for the company? So I think having access to that information, looking at trends in your business and external trends that affect your business, and being able to analyze those things and put some hypotheses around those so that you can actually let investors know, this is what this means. This is what we think is going to happen over the next couple of years based on this data. This is where we think the industry's at. This is how we think we can grow, and this is how we think the next evolution will play out in the next few years. So I think they're some of the key things that you need to think about in that capital raising process, depending on what stage you're at.
There's so much on the line because, you're doing all that research, but you must have had that thought, but what if I'm wrong? You can plan and plan and plan and research, but things happen and, COVID happened and you can't predict. So that must throw a spanner in the works too, right?
Absolutely. And you can't predict that some of those things like COVID. And I think it's a matter of looking at, what do you think is going to happen based on that sort of normal outcome predictability? Even the COVID outbreak, we can go back and look at some data from the last Spanish flu pandemic. And a lot of things that happened during that period sort of repeated themselves in some way. And obviously there's evolutions for, the internet age and information and you name it. But some of those human factors are very similar. When we look at the effect that COVID had on the stock market and then sort of, moving into an environment where, people have a little bit more pressure on them from a household environment perspective. A lot of those things we can look at other periods and see some similar patterns and look at consumer trends. And, people are people, they tend to do similar things and have similar patterns over time. So I think looking at that information and looking at what your data is telling you and having those different information at different stages is really important to sort of put it all together and say, well, this is what I think based on all that information.
Must have been a scary time in business though, given, the whole tourism sector basically shut down and you're in a business that is about people travelling. How did you navigate that? Must have been some nights where you're tossing and turning, the sweat on your brow.
Absolutely. I think it started out obviously when no one could travel or leave their house. So we all sort of heard the tourism businesses that had suffered as a result of that. So the first thing that we did was we built a fully automated credit system. So we were able to tell our customers, hey, you can have a refund. We've got a lot of inquiry right now. It's going to take us a little bit of time to process those. Or if you think you might want to take a holiday in the future, once all this is over, you can have an instant credit right now in your account and then talk to us about a refund later. So the good thing is that like over 95% of our customers said, oh, okay, if I can just have a credit and use it in the future, then I'm fine with that. So we did that process really quickly. Our development team spun it up in about 2 days' work to be able for us to do that. And that really helped us be able to really stabilise things, which was great. We then obviously had all of our staff. We were like, well, we've got no income coming in whatsoever. No one's booking a holiday at this stage. And then so we had to sort of stand down a lot of our staff. JobKeeper came in, so we're able to sort of bring them all back pretty quickly, which was great. And then we sort of started to think about, well, what are the things that people will want to use RVs for? And how do we think that will change as we evolve? So we started to actually get some bookings from COVID isolation. So we had people who had family members returning from overseas or whatever it may be. And at that stage, they were allowed to go and self-isolate. So we were dropping vans off in people's driveways for their family member to isolate for a couple of weeks. We then had government organisations renting vans for us to be able to start to do COVID testing from. So we sort of started to see a little bit of activity there. And then really as we saw those lockdowns start to lift and we could travel inside our state, things just went from 0 to 100 really quickly. So we didn't have a huge amount of time where we had nothing, but we were able to use that time to prepare and sort of get the business to a shape that we thought we'd be able to recover from really well when that demand came back.
Demand obviously came back, and it came back in a huge way. After capturing the Aussie market, you also have set your sights on overseas expansion. And I know that's something that you were starting to do in that, in 2020, you had these big plans for expansion, and then you've been able to kind of take off into the UK and Spain and New Zealand. But you chose the UK as your first cab off the rank. Why was that the right market to try next?
So we chose the UK. They're a very large RV caravanning market. There's a huge amount of people that participate in caravanning and camping in that market. They obviously speak English there. They're in the total opposite season to what we are in Australia. So we knew that we could evolve our platform pretty quickly. We could put in place the things that we needed to for that market in a relatively short period. So that was sort of where we decided to move from an expansion perspective first. I think, we learned a lot during that process, and it wasn't as easy as we thought it was going to be in the first place, but we got there. And then, as you mentioned, we launched in New Zealand right at the end of 2019. We launched in Spain right at the start of 2020. We just started to get going in some of those markets, and then everything sort of stopped for a while, but we were able to sort of see those markets recover really well.
So when you first began the Camplify journey, there was a lot of talking to your customers before that began. How much of a role does that play now? How important is that customer feedback to helping you innovate?
Yeah, really important. It's something we do constantly. We've put together a whole team of people who focus on those owners and getting that feedback and talking to them and feeding that information back into our product teams and our management teams and our marketing teams. So it's still a really core part of our business in every market that we operate in.
Are owners different in the different countries? I mean, I could imagine that the owners in the UK or Spain and New Zealand, there are kind of differences in how they are to the Australian owners. Is everyone quite on the same page about it? Is it easy to convince them and easy to kind of address their concerns?
Yeah, look, I think they have some elements of similarity, but you have different vehicle types, you have different hire types. We've got different types of rentals from short term to long term types. So I think there's local nuances that really need to be taken into account in every different market. We see different regulations and different restrictions or whatever it might be in place in all those markets as well. So it's really important that we continue that process of sort of understanding those customers so that we can build the right things that they need in each one of those markets.
So did you have boots on the ground in those new markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So that team that works with those owners, we sort of replicated that team in every market that we operate in, and they're sort of our local representatives that we go to really understand and be the voice of the customer.
Now, Camplify listed on the ASX in 2021. That's a pretty big deal. So how did you prepare for that?
Yeah, it really happened fairly quickly. Sometimes it can be a few years leading up to that point. For us, it kind of started at the back end of 2020 when we could see that there was other marketplaces going through that journey. We were thinking about how do we expand further and how do we get more shareholders in, how do we get more capital in, how do we get to a process where if we want to be able to expand and we see an opportunity that we can go to market and get access to that capital really quickly. And for all those things, sort of the ASX made sense for us. And so it was about sort of a 6-month period of preparing the business for that. We'd already sort of set the business up in a way that allowed us to move into that environment fairly quickly anyway. It was then sort of working through the process with who was going to float us, who was going to be our auditor and our legal advisors, and what new board members did we need, and then getting really into getting the business in the right shape and getting the information that we needed for our prospectus and for our shareholders and all those things that you have to go through as part of that journey.
Now, before we wrap up, Camplify is not your only startup. You're also the co-founder of the Sharing Hub. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, we started a group basically of similar businesses that have been in the sharing economy. And so there's Camplify, there's Spacer that allows you to rent your garage or someone out to someone that wants to store things. There's Mad Paws, that's a ability for you to book a pet sitter.
That's right. We spoke to Justus Hammer, the founder of Mad Paws, on this podcast.
So, yeah, there's a bunch of them that we sort of all got together and said, hey, it'd be good if we can have a working group that, we sort of advocate for the sharing economy. We can tell that message. We can have a space for people to work from. All those great things that you can sort of do as a real community. So that's been a great experience, and a lot of us have followed a similar journey. Mad Paws is listed as well. It's been good to be able to work with those other businesses in that process.
Justin, like as we sort of wrap up our chat, I think what strikes me from just chatting to you is that you've got a kind of a very earthy kind of style, and there's this image of a lot of people have of entrepreneurs as being all hustle 24/7. Now, I know maybe it's because you're still on holiday and you're very relaxed. I don't know if it's what you're like all the time, but what are the dangers of that, and how do you find the balance? Are you that hustle person, or do you feel like you've got that balance right?
Look, I definitely am. However, I think it's important from your customers, your shareholders, and most importantly, your staff, that you've got to be able to have a plan, know how you're navigating it, and get those people to come along that journey with you. And so I think my sort of personal journey, I guess, is, I started out my career at university doing a teaching degree. So, it's important to be able to help communicate that to all the people that are on that journey with you, to what you're doing and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve and how you want to get there, and then help them to be a part of that as you're both learning that together. And so, I think that your staff aren't always hustle people as well. Some of them are people that are really solid and doing a great job and delivering great outcomes. And if you're operating the business in that high energy environment, you've got to be able to be the calm leader at the top who can help people navigate that as you're going. So, you've got to help them understand what's the next step and how do we get to that next evolution and the next piece and the next piece, not just here's where we want to be in 2 years' time and go hell for leather and get it done. So I think it's really important to have that blend of styles in your approach.
Shared purpose and take your people on the journey with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's probably all we have time for. Justin Hales, thanks so much for joining us. You can find out more about Camplify at camplify.com.au. Thanks for listening. Join us again in a couple of weeks for another scintillating, fascinating, fantastic episode of First Act. We can't wait to bring it to you.
Thank you, Justin. It's great chatting with you.
Thank you. Cheers.